Hello everybody, my name is Christian Swenson. I am a YouTuber with autism and I post videos regularly about autism, autistic consciousness, and dealing with life on the spectrum. Today I wanted to talk about things you know and things you don't know. Because there are things you know and there are things you don't know. There are things I know and things I don't know. What's an example of something I know? I know how to write. I know how to read. I know how to walk. And those are things I know how to do. Actions I know how to do. There are also things I don't know. I don't know much about economics or finance. I am not very good at that. I used to know a lot about math. I don't know if I still do. I don't know a lot about computer science. I don't know a lot. I know more than I used to, but I don't know a lot about social interaction, maybe not as much as most people. And this is part of life. Part of life is knowing certain things and not knowing other things. This is especially true on the spectrum. On the spectrum, there are things that you know and there are things you don't know. Like, for example, like I just mentioned, the whole social world can seem like a mystery to us. Other things can too, right? For a long time, I was unable to drive because I was just too scared to take the first steps. I can now drive. I was driving a lot today. But today I wanted to talk about something that will give you an edge. Something that will give you an edge, not just as a person with autism, but as a person. Something that will help you have an edge in life with this dynamic of things you know and things you don't know. So let me give you a useful skill, a way of talking and a way of thinking about things you know and things you don't know. I made a little 4x4 matrix right here. Don't know if you can see it. Let me just kind of outline here, just make it a little brighter. Things you know, things you don't know, things you know, things you don't know. Why is it a 2x2 matrix? Well, the reason why is because there are things you know that you know that you know. For instance, right? I know. What's something that I know that I know? Let's say how to read. However, there are things you know that you don't know that you know. Have you ever had that experience? Or maybe you're listening to a lecture, or maybe something like this often happens in comedy. Someone will make an observation, and you're like, yeah, that's right, but I had never thought about that before. I knew that, but I didn't know I knew that. And so this would be something like that, like comedy or insight, right? Insight, right? Of a certain kind, right? Insights in all of these. However, there are things you don't know that you don't know. There's unknowns, right? The idea is there are things you don't know that are so unknown that you don't know them. And can you conceive of them? Well, if they're unknown unknowns, you don't conceive of them. You don't know what they are, so they're kind of in your blind spot. The blind spot is where the unknown unknowns live. And the unknown unknowns, those are the things you need to be afraid of because you don't know when they're coming to get you, really. It's like, I don't know, let's say somebody, what's an example of this? Somebody, I don't know, is cooking, for instance, and they leave the oven on, right? They don't know that the oven's on, but they also don't know the oven's on, and that's really dangerous, right? And so there's some overlap here, but I want to make the case for you that a lot of power and a lot of insight can be gained from moving things from here to here. From unknown unknowns to known unknowns. And this is the quadrant I really want to focus on today. The idea of knowing things you don't know. Because especially as someone on the autism spectrum, there are things you're very well aware you don't know. How to socialize well, how to maybe drive, how to do executive function, right? Certain skills, certain areas of life that keep coming up that won't let you forget them, that are unknown to you, but that you know you don't know. But I think you can gain a real power when you try to look for similarities in the things that don't make sense to you and look for things that are in common between the things that don't make sense to you, right? Because there are lots of things that don't make sense to you all day, all day, all the time, right? As a human being, there are things that we don't know that are really unknown unknowns. And maybe for a little bit, you'll know something about them because you read a paragraph, but it doesn't make sense to you. But if you're like, this word keeps coming up in lots of different contexts, right? I read this book, and what's a word I could use? Like oblique. Maybe you don't know the word oblique. So you're like, oblique, that's a word I don't know. And maybe you don't look it up, and you think, oblique, that's another word. It's the same word, but in another context. Oblique, 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 oblique. And then you suddenly start to get a picture of what it is because of all the different places you'd seen it in. Because you were looking for similarities between the things you don't know, you suddenly start to know them. So it kind of goes like this. Oblique was something you didn't know, that word. And now all of a sudden, something you don't know, and then something you know. And this is a pattern that you can use. Looking for patterns. Really, looking for patterns. The idea is that there are things you don't realize you don't know, but by looking for patterns in the things that don't make sense, you can get a preliminary picture of them and then start to know them, right? And so maybe you'll be socializing or trying to, and you'll notice that people make a certain expression on their face, right? You don't know what it means, but you memorize it. You know what it means. I mean, you don't know what it means, but you memorize it. You know what it looks like. And maybe you see that same expression somewhere else and think, oh, that's interesting. That's a pattern. It's starting to move from here to here. And then all of a sudden you see, oh, wait, that same expression's over there. And then it starts to make sense because of context, right? And so you gain a real strength by learning that the things you don't know are things you can learn about because they resemble each other, right? My wife was just telling me that she has memories, really interesting memories where she feels irritated when she remembers them, where she feels like, oh, wait a minute. No, she feels like, oh, this makes me angry, this makes me upset. She has learned by looking at the similarities, this particular similarity between her memories, that this type of feeling means that she was generally in the wrong in that memory and didn't want to admit it. It means she was being stubborn or arrogant. And she's learned by looking for a certain type of feeling as a similarity that comes up when she remembers it about that type of thing. You can do this with your own memories. Try to scan through your own memories. Look for patterns. Look for patterns in the things that didn't make sense then, but make sense now. This is something I've seen in a lot of autistic people as they learn on their own slower pace about how social things work. Memories of times from before when they were children make sense now in your memory in a way that they didn't make sense then. Facial expressions will tend to mean more, right? The context will be apparent with time and with experience. Another example of this, have you ever noticed that people who say, oh, you're a jerk, right? You're a jerk. And you're a jerk, and you're a jerk. And they say to everybody that they're a jerk, right? Well, that usually means that there's something about them that is kind of jerkish, right? If everybody is a jerk, that means you're probably the jerk, right? Because jerks call people jerks. And that's another pattern. You look for patterns, and it tells you about something you didn't know, right? That you're a jerk, right? Another example might be, I don't know, maybe you act a certain way in a certain kind of context, right? For instance, when I'm driving often at four-way stops, I'll have this little weirdness where it's like, are you going, are I going, and this type of thing keeps happening, and I think that, well, maybe I'm the common denominator here. And this type of thing also happens in stores, in grocery stores, in public places. It's like, oh, are we going here? Are we going here? Right? And I learned something about me because I looked for patterns I learned that I'm somebody who doesn't really understand the reciprocity of turning to the left or turning to the right. And that's something I learned about me. And you could come up with all sorts of examples. Look for patterns in the ways, I don't know, that the birds are on the wire, right? Maybe the birds are on the wire a lot. And if you piece together the memories of when the birds are there, you can learn a lot about something. You don't know what, but it's going to move from the unknown to the known unknown to the known known, right? And this is a beautiful thing that has helped me a lot. Like I said, or maybe I didn't say this, but finance and money is something that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But I've used this technique to learn more about it by looking for things in the world of money and in the world, in that world generally, that kind of resemble each other. They feel the same in the way they don't make sense to me. I can think, this is probably the same concept, isn't it? I can kind of circle around the thing that doesn't make sense because they don't make sense in the same way. And things that don't make sense in the same way are often the same type of thing. And then you can learn about them, and then they make a little bit more sense. So yeah, so the crucial bit, the bit here that you need to learn is that, learn the things you don't know. Know the things you don't know by looking for patterns. So I'll see you next week. My name's Christian Swenson. See you later.